Deputy Keaveney, 10 minutes.
Concurrently, here we are again. We find a bill which contains measures that will drive another wedge between the government and the citizen. It's another sundering of the social contact that doesn't merely exist between citizens in this state, but an intergenerational relationship that has been wedged by this government and the proposals in this legislation. It is as a result, and a predictable result, and a deliberate action of the government's engagement in the politics of division. They have encouraged different groups in society to turn on each other, and we have a situation now where the most socially divisive economic policies have emerged from this government: public versus private, employed versus unemployed, able versus disabled, urban versus rural. And the Minister is delighted to have a situation where people are at each other's throats, where there isn't sufficient opposition to this government and social cohesion is on its knees. And if people are at each other, they're not effectively opposing the government. And it's called social solidarity. And that social solidarity, Cancurla, was already weakened. It was weakened as a consequence of the excesses of the Tiger years. And certainly, this bill is now sets out to kill off the remaining remnants of social solidarity in this country. And it's a sad loss to think that that's the efforts of this government, because I see that there is a value in social solidarity, and I think that it was originally essential for our economic and social recovery, not just in economic terms, but more importantly, in the terms of our social terms. Now, the government has sown the seeds of discord, and while groups are out there squabbling and competing in society, you know, what we have is a situation where the government are effectively picking off one group in society over the other. And, you know, you can continue to try and pull this trick to protect the powerful vested interests within society, and not only in the Irish society, but outside of this country, such as the legal profession, the banking sector, the international bondholders, the medical drug companies, the large corporations, the senior civil servants, the public servants, including government ministers. The list will go on and on, because this budget has shielded the worst effects on the current difficulties on those classes. From our failure to reform the legal services and our failure to secure the savings in the medication bill for the health service, the government has shown a marked reluctance to engage in reform that threatens those with the capacity to resource their own resistance. Labour ministers expended much hot air last year when they boasted about the wealth taxes that they brought in. Cancurla, as you know, those wealth taxes have yielded far short than what had originally been anticipated. And it's now clear that the elderly in society and other groups will have to make up the difference for the wealthy. The thought that they might have to go back and make an effort to reclaim from the wealthy what they failed to yield in taxes, it doesn't appear to have occurred to the minister. And this bill attacks what matters most to elderly people in our society, and that is security of old age. With the cost of medical insurance escalating, indeed the finance bill has made sure that it's going to escalate more, many elderly people are left fearful how they will pay their medical costs, and that's at a particular time in their life when care becomes a great concern for them. This bill will leave many more facing into uncertainty with their best friend, fear. Already, Cancurla, my clinics are filled with senior citizens worried about the future of their medical care. This bill continues to add significant disparity between the limits of couples, particularly relative to two single people who would apply for a medical card. And there seems to be some idea that people can seek efficiencies in their respective lives relative to their medical complaints. Now, previous speakers have raised this issue, and I want to raise it because it is as if the minister believes that a husband suffering from cancer and a wife suffering from osteoporosis can somehow seek savings in treatment of their complaints simply by the virtue of being a couple. It's an absolute nonsense. And I can see no fair case for a couple having to have a lower income limit than that of two single people. The bill also cannot be seen in isolation as it is one of several attacks on elderly people being made by the government. Prescription charges have been mentioned. They've been increased. We know that it's causing grave difficulty for senior citizens in society. We know because the Minister has informed us of this during his time in the opposition benches. You can cut the phone allowance, you increase the dirt tax, you raid their pensions, you attack their security, but most of all, you abolish the bereavement grant, which has met many senior citizens upset in this country about having to pay, or their spouse having to pay, for a funeral course. And the government has been pushed to such measures by the dawning awareness that their own economic policies are simply not working. The growth that the government have consistently promised has failed to materialise. When the previous government attempted to cut medical cards to the elderly, many of those now on the government benches stood outside government buildings and lacerated the opposition for that. They engaged in high-blown rhetoric about the debt owed to the generation that fought the civil rights campaigns. Yet when it came for them to be tested on their virtue, they failed. They literally talked the talk, but lamentably, no great surprise, they failed to walk the walk. Underlying much of this attitude towards the elderly people in society is simply a view in government that elderly people are a cost and a burden to society. The Minister for Health has only recently blamed the overspend in his own department, not on his own maladministration, but rather on the heretofore unnoticed, to him in the past, the phenomenon in which people are getting older, people are living longer. The aged are to blame for conditions of our health services because they have the temerity to live longer. And there's a nasty language deployed by this government, such as the bed blockers, which is a sign of failure to recognise the inherent value of the dignity of those people who are entitled to services in this country. Being a productive member of society has been reduced to a meaning only of those who work and pay taxes. Other forms of contributions go unrecognised. Gratitude for past contributions, even in lifetimes of difficult times, it's non-existent. And some will say that it's simply a Fine Gael readverting to its natural instinct for their politics. But Labour at least claim to aspire, what I would argue, for a higher ideal. Every year, Labour pays homage to the ghost of Tom Johnson, the second leader of the Labour Party. He was one of the authors of the Democratic Programme for the First Dáil. And from that document, the following quote is taken: "The Irish public fully realises the necessity of abolishing the present odious, degrading, foreign, poor law system, substituting therefore a sympathetic native scheme for care of the nation's aged and infirm, who shall not be regarded as a burden, but rather entitled to the nation's gratitude and consideration." Ken Corla, the aged should never be regarded as a burden in our society, and they are due the nation's gratitude and consideration. I would argue, and some before me have argued, that it's a noble ideal recognised by many former members of the Labour Party who now have attained high office. In a speech in this House in January 2009, a particular former Labour minister described the Democratic Programme as being a vision for the possibility, as constitution, I quote, "the minimum demand for Labour's participation in government." We all know the reality of that. Labour have lacked the courage of their convictions. They have failed the old, they've failed the young, they've failed women, and they've left those in the margin society isolated. Ken Corla, the bill represents yet another nail in the coffin of Tom Johnson. I can only hope that Labour might at least have the decency to let the spirit of this man rest in peace and take his name off the summer school that they use every year, until once again that they find the courage within to stand up and profess so earnestly believe in the democratic programme.